I need to write this down before I forget the details, before the new reality I'm living in makes the old one seem like a dream. Someone needs to know what happened at the Desert Wash laundromat on Highway 95, 40 miles outside of Tonopah, Nevada. Someone needs to understand why that place is different now, why the lights never quite look right through the windows after midnight, and why locals started taking the long way around after last month's blue moon. My name is Marcus Holloway, and until 6 weeks ago, I was the kind of desperate that makes you consider things you'd normally run from. The kind of desperate that makes a bizarre job posting with impossible pay seem like salvation instead of the obvious trap it was. I'd been living in my 2003 Honda Civic for 3 weeks when I saw the help wanted sign. The repo men had taken my apartment on October 3rd, exactly 60 days after I'd lost my job at the warehouse. 60 days of watching 47,123 in medical debt from my mother's final month's compound, with interest I couldn't pay. 60 days of rice-a-roni twice a day when I could afford it, nothing when I couldn't. The Civic's check engine light had been on for 2 months, and I knew, with the kind of bone-deep certainty that comes with poverty, that when it finally died, that would be the end of my story. I'd driven out to the desert to die, if I'm being honest. Not actively, not with a plan, but in that passive way where you stop trying and let the universe decide. The gas gauge was hovering just above E when I pulled into the Desert Wash laundromat's parking lot at 11:47 p.m. on October 24th. I wasn't there to do laundry. All my clothes were dirty, but I had $17 to my name, and that was earmarked for gas that might get me to Vegas where I could maybe find day labor. The laundromat squatted alone in the desert, like something that had been forgotten. A flat-roofed concrete block painted the color of old bones, with windows that glowed sickly fluorescent green against the black October night. The parking lot was empty except for a pristine white van parked at the far end. Desert Wash Services stenciled on the side in peeling blue letters. The Help Wanted sign was taped to the inside of the glass door, handwritten on yellow legal paper. Night attendant needed 11 p.m. 7 a.m. shift, 42-hour cash. Start immediately, inquire within $42 an hour. Cash. The number hit me like cold water. That was more than I'd made as a warehouse supervisor. More than anyone made for watching washing machines spin in the middle of nowhere. Every instinct I developed over 34 years of living told me to drive away. But $17 in my wallet and that check engine light made the decision for me. The door chimed when I pushed it open. Not an electronic beep, but an actual bell, brass and old, that rang with a clarity that made my teeth ache. The smell hit me immediately. Industrial detergent mixed with something else, something that reminded me of hot metal and ozone, like the air before a thunderstorm. The laundromat was bigger inside than it looked from the parking lot. 2 long rows of washing machines faced each other across a center aisle, their white enamel surfaces reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Beyond them, industrial dryers lined the back wall like silent sentinels. To my right, a counter with an old mechanical cash register and a door marked Office, Employees Only. To my left, hard plastic chairs in faded orange and a vending machine that hummed with a frequency that wasn't quite right. "You'll hear about the job," the voice came from behind me, though I was certain no one had been there when I'd entered. I turned to find a woman standing by the door, tall and angular, wearing a dress that might have been fashionable in 1962. Her hair was the color of cigarette ash, pinned up in a style that matched the dress, but it was her stillness that made my skin crawl. She stood without any of the small movements that make people human. No rise and fall of breath, no subtle shifts of weight, no blinking. "I'm Mrs. Vega," she said, and when she smiled, her face moved in sections, like someone who'd learned to smile from a textbook. "I managed the night operations." "Marcus," I managed. "I saw the sign." "Yes." She moved then, gliding more than walking to the counter. Her reflection in the washing machine glass seemed to lag a half second behind her actual movement. "The position has been difficult to fill. We have very specific requirements." "I can work nights," I said quickly. "I have experience in customer service, and..." "Experience is irrelevant." She pulled out a manila folder from beneath the counter. "What matters is your ability to follow instructions. Precisely. Without deviation, without question." She opened the folder and removed a single sheet of paper, sliding it across to me. At the top, in the same handwriting as the Help Wanted sign, "Rules for Night Attendant." "Read them," Mrs. Vega said. If you cannot commit to following each rule exactly, leave now. If you accept the position and break the rules, there will be consequences. The way she said consequences made my stomach clench. But $42 an hour. I read the rules. Rules for night attendant. Rule 1. The laundromat serves 2 types of customers. You will know the difference. Serve both equally, but never acknowledge the difference to either. Rule 2. Every hour, on the hour, check that all machines are running. If machine 13 is running when it should not be, do not turn it off. Do not look inside. Wait in the office until it stops. Rule 3. If someone enters wearing all white after 3 a.m., give them whatever they ask for from the register. Do not count it. Do not look at their face. Say, for tonight, yes, to any question they ask. Rule 4. The storage room door must remain locked between 2:17 a.m. and 4:44 a.m. If you hear knocking from inside during this time, do not respond. If you hear your mother's voice from inside during this time, especially do not respond. Rule 5. Clean the lint traps in all dryers at midnight, 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. exactly. Burn whatever you find. The incinerator is in the back. Do not examine what you're burning. Rule 6. If the payphone rings, it has no connection. Answer on the 3rd ring. Listen but do not speak. When they hang up, write down what they said in the logbook. We will know if you don't. Rule 7. At 5:33 a.m., you must go outside and check the desert through the back door. Count the lights you see. If there are more than 3, stay inside and lock the back door until sunrise. If there are exactly 3, it's safe. If there are none, quit immediately and leave Nevada. I looked up from the paper. Mrs. Vega hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked, during the entire time I'd been reading. These are, I started. Non-negotiable, she finished. You will be paid in cash at the end of each shift. $336. No taxes, no paperwork. You may sleep in the break room during the day if needed. There is a shower and a hot plate. We provide uniforms. $336 a night, over $2,000 a week. It was insane money for insane rules, but I was past the point of rational decision-making. When do I start? Mrs. Vega's segmented smile returned. Now. She walked me through the basic operations, how to run the register, where supplies were kept, how to operate the machines for customers who needed help. Normal things explained in unnecessarily specific detail. Then she showed me the office, a cramped space with a desk, a monitor showing security camera feeds, and a logbook thick with entries in different handwriting. The log is essential, she said, her finger tracing the leather cover without actually touching it. Everything unusual must be recorded. Everything. She gave me a uniform, khaki pants and a blue polo with desert wash embroidered on the pocket. The fabric felt strange, heavy, and slightly damp, even though it appeared dry. The break room she'd mentioned was through a door behind the dryers, containing a cot, a card table, a hot plate as promised, and a shower stall that looked like it belonged in a prison. A single window looked out onto the desert. Your shift begins in 10 minutes, Mrs. Vega said, checking a watch I hadn't noticed her wearing before. I suggest you change. The uniform fit perfectly, which bothered me since she'd never asked my size. When I came back out, Mrs. Vega was standing by the front door. Remember, she said, follow the rules exactly. Your life depends on it. She left without another word, the bell chiming with that tooth-aching clarity. I watched through the window as she got into the white van and drove away, her headlights swallowed by the desert darkness within seconds. At exactly 11 p.m., according to the clock above the register, my first shift officially began. Night 1, the first hour was almost disappointingly normal. I sat behind the counter, reading through the logbook while the fluorescent lights hummed their off-key tune. The entries went back 3 years, different handwriting recording mundane events. Customer did 2 loads, paid in quarters. Vending machine B4 jammed, refunded $1.50. Normal laundromat stuff, but scattered throughout were other entries. October 2nd, 3:33 a.m. They came in white again. Gave them $247.83. Did not look. They asked about the drought. Said, for tonight, yes. September 15th, 2:17 a.m. Heard knocking in storage room. Then Mom's voice calling my name. Did not respond. Knocked for 17 minutes. August 30th, 5:33 a.m. 4 lights in the desert. Locked back door. Something scratched at it until 6:47 a.m. Deep gouges in metal when checked after sunrise. At midnight exactly, I performed my first required task, cleaning the lint traps. The first 11 dryers contained normal lint, grey fluff that I gathered into a trash bag. But dryer 12, the last in the row, was different. When I pulled the lint trap, what came out wasn't lint, it was hair. Human hair, long and black, twisted into a tight ball. It was warm. Not dryer warm, but body warm, and slightly damp. I nearly dropped it, my brain trying to rationalize what I was holding. But rule 5 was clear. Burn whatever you find. Don't examine it. The incinerator was behind the building, an old industrial model that looked like it belonged in a morgue. I threw the hair in, along with the normal lint, and watched it burn. The hair sizzled and popped, releasing a smell like copper pennies and spoiled milk. I went back inside quickly, my hands shaking. At 12:47 a.m., the bell chimed. My first customer. He looked normal enough, middle-aged, Hispanic, wearing jeans and a faded Raiders jacket. He carried a laundry basket full of work clothes. "Open all night?" he asked, looking around the empty laundromat. "Yes, sir, 24 hours. He nodded and chose a machine, number 7, feeding it quarters from a roll. We didn't speak while he loaded his clothes, added detergent, and started the cycle. He sat in one of the orange chairs and pulled out his phone. Normal. Everything was normal. At 1 a.m., I did my hourly check. All machines were off except for number 7, which churned away with the customer's clothes. Machine 13 sat silent and still at the end of the row, its door slightly open like always. At 1:23 a.m., the bell chimed again. This customer was different. She wore a sundress despite the October night, the fabric a faded yellow pattern that might have been flowers once. She was maybe 20, blonde hair hanging limp past her shoulders. She carried no laundry. "Excuse me," she said, and her voice had an echo to it, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "I need to wash something, but I forgot my quarters." I looked at her, really looked, and noticed what was wrong. Her feet weren't quite touching the floor. Not floating exactly, but like the floor, was a few millimeters lower for her than for me. Rule 1, serve both types of customers equally, but never acknowledge the difference. "There's a change machine by the vending machine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It takes 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s. She smiled, and her teeth were too white, like fresh snow. "Thank you. You're very kind." She glided, there was no other word for it, to the change machine and fed in a bill I couldn't quite see. It looked like money from the corner of my eye, but when I tried to focus on it, my vision swam. Quarters rattled into the dispenser. She chose machine 13. My heart lurched. The rules said if machine 13 was running when it shouldn't be, don't turn it off, don't look inside, wait in the office. But was this when it shouldn't be? She was a customer, even if she wasn't the normal kind. I watched, frozen, as she loaded something into the machine. I couldn't see what. My eyes wouldn't focus on it properly. She added detergent from a box that materialized in her hands, fed in quarters, and started the machine. The sound it made wasn't right. Washing machines have a rhythm. Fill, agitate, drain, spin. Machine 13 sounded like breathing, deep and wet, with a heartbeat underneath. The woman sat in a chair directly across from the machine, never breaking eye contact with its door. "Don't mind me," she said without looking at me. "I'll be done soon." I retreated to the office, leaving the door open so I could watch both customers. The man in the Raiders jacket had dozed off, his phone loose in his hand. The woman sat perfectly still, watching machine 13 breathe. At 2 a.m., I did my check. The normal customer's wash cycle had ended. I watched him transfer his clothes to a dryer, still half asleep. Machine 13 continued its wet breathing. The woman hadn't moved. At 2:16 a.m., I remembered rule 4. 1 minute until the storage room door needed to be locked. I grabbed the keys from the desk drawer and moved quickly to the door beside the office. It was painted the same industrial beige as the walls, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. The padlock was already in place, but unlocked. I clicked it shut just as the clock hit 2:17 a.m. Immediately, something knocked from inside. 3 measured knocks, like someone politely requesting entry. I stepped back, my hand still on the lock. 3 more knocks, harder this time. Then a voice, muffled but clear. "Marcus, Marcus, honey, open the door. My mother had been dead for 8 months. I'd watched them lower her casket into the ground at Sunset Memorial back in Bakersfield. But that was her voice, exactly as I remembered it from before the cancer took her strength. Warm and slightly impatient, the way she'd sounded when I'd locked myself in the bathroom as a kid. Marcus, I'm stuck in here. Please, honey, just open the door. My hand trembled on the padlock. Logic told me it was impossible. The rules told me not to respond. But hearing her voice again, I know you're there, baby. I can hear you breathing. Please, I'm scared. I backed away from the door, my hands clenched into fists. The knocking resumed, no longer polite. Hammering now, making the door shake in its frame. Marcus, Marcus, don't leave me in here. Please, God, don't leave me in the dark. The normal customer had woken up, looking around, confused at the noise. The woman watching Machine 13 hadn't moved, but she was smiling now. Let me out! Let me out! I can't breathe. The dark is eating me. The voice was still my mother's, but distorted now, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The hammering became rhythmic, mechanical, inhuman. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Silence for 30 seconds. Then, in a whisper that somehow carried clearly through the door, "You let me die alone. The least you can do is let me out." I stood there for 17 minutes, according to the clock, while whatever was in that storage room used my dead mother's voice to try to break me. It cycled through everything: anger, pleading, sobbing, even humming the lullaby she'd sung when I was young. At exactly 2:34 a.m., it stopped mid-word, like someone had pulled a plug. Machine 13 stopped breathing at the same moment. The woman stood up smoothly and opened the machine's door. I couldn't see what she pulled out. My brain simply refused to process it. It was like looking at a blind spot, a space where something should be, but wasn't. She folded this nothing carefully and placed it in a basket that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," she said to me as she passed, that echo still in her voice. "You follow the rules well. That's good. We need people who follow rules." She left, the bell chiming normally, and I watched through the window as she walked into the desert and dissolved into the darkness like sugar in water. The normal customer finished his laundry at 3:15 a.m., paid for his dryer time, and left with a mumbled, "Have a good night." He seemed completely unaware of anything unusual. At 3 a.m. exactly, I cleaned the lint traps again. This time, dryer 3 contained what looked like small bones, bird-sized but wrong in shape. Dryer 8 had newspaper clippings from 1987, all about missing hikers. Dryer 12 had that hair again, but grey this time and smelling of formaldehyde. I burned it all without examining it closely, the incinerator flames turning strange colors: green, purple, a brief flash of absolute black that hurt to perceive. At 3:47 a.m., the bell chimed. A man entered wearing all white. Everything about him was white: suit, shirt, tie, shoes. Even his skin had a bleached quality, like paper left in the sun. But it was the wrongness of the white that made my stomach turn. It wasn't a color so much as an absence, like someone had cut a man-shaped hole in reality and forgotten to fill it in. He walked to the counter with movements that were too smooth, as if he was on rails. When he stopped in front of me, I could hear a sound like static, like television, snow given audio form. "I need change," he said, and his voice came from everywhere except his mouth. Rule 3 was burned into my brain. Give them whatever they ask for from the register. Do not count it. Do not look at their face. Say, "For tonight, yes," to any question they ask. I opened the register, keeping my eyes focused on his white tie. My hands moved without my conscious control, pulling out bills, 20s, 10s, 5s, 1s. I didn't count them. I couldn't have if I'd tried. The numbers wouldn't stay in my head. I held out the money, and when he took it, his fingers were cold enough to burn. The bills disappeared into his white suit pocket, which seemed to go deeper than physics should allow. "Is she still waiting?" he asked. "For tonight, yes," I responded automatically. "Does she still remember what she lost?" "For tonight, yes." "Will the door open when it's time?" "For tonight, yes." He stood there for a moment longer, and I could feel him looking at me even though I kept my eyes down. The static sound intensified, and I smelled ozone and copper. "You're new," he said, and it wasn't a question. The last one looked at my face. We had to fold him into machine 13. He's still running, you know. Still washing himself clean. still trying to get out. He left without another word, the bell silent when he passed through the door. I looked at the register. It was still full of money, as if I'd never given him anything. Or as if what I'd given him wasn't money at all. At 4:44 a.m., I unlocked the storage room door. Nothing came out. When I peered inside, it was just a normal storage room. Shelves of detergent, bleach, fabric softener. But the floor had scratches on it, like something with claws had been pacing for hours. The payphone rang at 4:51 a.m. It was mounted on the wall between the vending machine and the chairs, an old rotary model in faded yellow. According to Mrs. Vega, it had no connection, no wires running to it, but it rang anyway, shrill and demanding. Once, twice. On the third ring, I picked up. Static at first, then breathing, then a voice that sounded like it was coming from very far away or very deep underwater. The exchange rate is 7 years for every sunrise. The laundry washes more than clothes. The desert counts its lights carefully. Machine 13 remembers what it was before it was a machine. The white man collects payments, but the debt never decreases. Your mother is in the storage room, and she's always been in the storage room, and she'll never be in the storage room. The rule about the lights is wrong. There should be 4, not 3. Trust the woman in the sundress. Don't trust the woman in the sundress. She's both here and not here, like Schrodinger's customer. The line went dead. I wrote it all down in the logbook, my hands shaking. The words looked wrong on the page, like they were trying to crawl away from the paper. At 5:33 a.m., I went to the back door to check the desert. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. What if there were no lights? The rules said to quit immediately and leave Nevada. But I needed this job. I needed the money. I opened the door. The desert stretched out black and endless, and there, in the distance, were exactly 3 lights. They hovered about 6 feet off the ground, perfectly still, arranged in a triangle. They weren't electric lights, they had an organic quality, like bioluminescence, pulsing slightly in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. 3 lights. It was safe. I closed the door and locked it, then returned to the office. The clock crawled towards 7 a.m., each minute feeling like an hour. At 6 a.m., I cleaned the lint traps one final time. Every dryer was normal this time, just regular lint, which somehow felt more unsettling than finding bones or hair. At 6:47 a.m., a normal customer came in, a truck driver who needed to wash his clothes before getting back on the road. We chatted about the weather, the roads, normal things. It felt surreal after the night I'd had. At exactly 7 a.m., Mrs. Vega walked through the door. "You survived," she said, and there was something like approval in her voice. Most don't follow the rules properly their first night. She pulled an envelope from her purse and handed it to me. Inside, exactly $336 in crisp bills. "Same time tonight?" she asked. I thought about the voice in the storage room, the white man, the woman who wasn't quite there, Machine 13 breathing like something alive. I thought about my car with its check engine light, my $17, my complete lack of options. "Yes," I said. Mrs. Vega smiled her segmented smile. "Good. Oh, and Marcus, your mother says hello." She left before I could respond, and I stood there holding my money, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. But I had $336 more than I'd had last night, and in my situation, that was all that mattered. I slept in my car in the parking lot, too exhausted to drive anywhere. My dreams were full of washing machines breathing and my mother's voice echoing from behind locked doors. Night 2, I arrived at 10:45 p.m., wearing the uniform I'd hand-washed in the bathroom sink and dried in the desert sun. Mrs. Vega was waiting, standing in exactly the same spot as the night before. "Tonight will be busier," she said, without preamble. "Saturday nights always are. The desert is more active and the boundaries are thinner. You might see things that don't make sense. Don't try to make them make sense. Just follow the rules." She handed me a folded piece of paper. Additional guidelines. Not rules exactly, but suggestions. I unfolded it. If you see someone you know is dead, they're not really them. The vending machine sometimes dispenses things that aren't food. Don't eat them. If all the lights go out except for machine 13, hide in the office until they come back on. The desert lights are learning to count. Sometimes they get it wrong on purpose. Time moves differently between 2:17 and 4:44. Don't trust clocks during this period. "Why didn't you give me these last night?" I asked. Because you needed to survive the first night thinking it might be simple. Now you know it's not. Now you'll take the suggestion seriously. She left, and I settled in for my second shift. The first customer arrived at 11:15 p.m., a normal woman doing a week's worth of laundry. She seemed nervous, kept looking over her shoulder, but didn't say why. She chose machines 3, 4, and 5, stayed until everything was in the dryers, then left quickly. At midnight, I cleaned the lint traps. Dryer 7 contained what looked like photographs, but burned and distorted. I caught a glimpse of faces in them before throwing them in the incinerator. They all looked like me at different ages, including ages I hadn't reached yet. Dryer 11 had teeth, human teeth, still bloody at the roots. Dryer 12 had the hair again, but this time it was my mother's color and texture. I knew because I'd brushed it for her during her chemo, when she was too weak to raise her arms. The payphone rang at 12:33 a.m. Not the right time according to the rules, but I answered anyway on the third ring. This time, the voice was clearer. You're being tested. The job isn't really about the laundromat. It's about maintaining the boundary. The things that wash here aren't clothes. They're sins, memories, pieces of reality that need to be cleaned before they can fit back into the world. Machine 13 is the oldest. It remembers when this place was an inland sea. The white man isn't a man. He's an absence that gained consciousness. Your mother is in the storage room because part of you is in the storage room. Everyone who works here leaves something behind. I wrote it all down, even though my hand was trembling so badly the words were barely legible. At 1 a.m., I did my check. All machines were running. All of them. Every single machine was churning away, even though only one customer had come in and she'd only used 3 machines. I stood in the center aisle, surrounded by the sound of 30 washing machines running cycles with nothing in them. The fluorescent lights flickered in a pattern that seemed deliberate, like Morse code. Machine 13 was running too, but its sound was different. That breathing sound again, but faster, excited. I retreated to the office and watched through the security monitors. The cameras showed the laundromat from 4 angles, but what they showed didn't match what I could see through the office window. On the monitors, the laundromat was full of people. Dozens of them, all washing clothes, all normal looking. But through the window, the machines ran alone. At 1:17 a.m., the woman in the sundress returned. She entered through the back door, which should have been locked. She was carrying a basket full of what looked like fabric, but the fabric moved like liquid. "Don't mind me," she said, though I hadn't spoken. "I'm just here for my things." She went to machine 13 and opened it mid-cycle. Water should have poured out, but instead, something else emerged, a shape that my eyes couldn't quite process, like television static in 3 dimensions. She gathered it carefully into her basket. "You're doing well," she said to me. "Better than the last 3. They all looked at things they shouldn't have. One looked at the white man's face. One opened the storage room door during the prohibited time. One counted the wrong number of lights and tried to run. The desert doesn't let you run when you've counted wrong." "What is this place?" I asked, breaking my own rule about not asking questions. She tilted her head in a way that human necks shouldn't allow. "It's a laundromat. It's always been a laundromat. It just washes more than you think. People bring their guilt here, their secrets, their sins. They don't know they're doing it, but the machines know. The machines clean what needs cleaning." "And you?" "I'm a customer. I've been a customer for 63 years. I died in 1960, hit by a truck on Highway 95, right where the parking lot is now. But I had laundry in machine 13 when it happened, and I can't leave until it's done. It's been washing for 63 years. Almost clean now. Almost." She took her impossible laundry and left through the front door this time, the bell chiming softly. At 2 a.m., something scratched at the back door. Long, deliberate scratches, like someone with keys trying to find the lock in the dark. I ignored it. At 2:16 a.m., I locked the storage room door. The knocking started immediately, but this time it wasn't my mother's voice. It was mine. "Hey, let me out," my own voice said from behind the door. "This isn't funny anymore. I need to get back to work or Mrs. Vega will fire me." Hearing my own voice was worse than hearing my mother's. It was exactly right. Every inflection, every tone, even the slight rasp from too many cigarettes in my 20s. "Come on, man, open the door. I'm you. I'm literally you. You're out there, and I'm in here, but we're the same person. This is just a time thing, non-linear. You'll understand when you open the door. I backed away, but my voice followed me, getting louder. Don't you want to know how you really got this job? Don't you want to know why Mrs. Vega chose you? It's in your blood, Marcus. Mom knew. Mom came here before she died. She made a deal. That made me stop. My mother had disappeared for 3 days about a month before her diagnosis. She'd said she'd gone to visit her sister in Phoenix, but Aunt Linda had called during those 3 days looking for her. She traded 7 years for 7 months, my voice continued. 7 years of someone from her bloodline working here for 7 more months with you. She knew about the cancer before the doctors did. The desert told her. The desert offers deals to people who are desperate enough, but the payment always comes due. I wanted to call it a liar, but part of me knew it was true. The way my mother had looked at me those last months, the way she'd kept apologizing for things that hadn't happened yet. I'll make a deal with you, my voice said. Open the door and I'll take your shift. You can leave. I'll stay and work. Mrs. Vega won't know the difference. We're the same person after all. At 2:34 a.m., the voice stopped mid-sentence, just like the night before. But this time, I heard something else as it cut off. A sound like fabric tearing, like reality ripping at the seams. The lights went out. All of them except for machine 13, which glowed from within with a phosphorescent light that hurt to look at. Following the suggestions Mrs. Vega had given me, I hid in the office, crouched under the desk. Through the gap beneath the door, I could see that green-white light pulsing, and shadows moving through it. Tall shadows that bent in impossible ways. I heard footsteps that weren't footsteps, more like something wet dragging across the floor. They stopped right outside the office door. Something whispered in a language that predated human speech, words that tried to crawl into my ears and change the shape of my thoughts. Then the normal lights came back on, all at once, and everything was quiet. I emerged from the office to find the laundromat empty and normal, except for one thing. There were wet footprints leading from machine 13 to the storage room door. The footprints had too many toes. At 3 a.m., I cleaned the lint traps. Every single one contained hair this time, all different colors and textures, all warm and damp. The amount was impossible, more hair than the traps could physically hold. It took 6 trips to the incinerator, and the smell of burning hair clung to me for the rest of the night. At 3:33 a.m., the white man returned. This time, there were 2 of him. Or maybe it was one of him twice. They stood at slightly different angles, like double vision made real. "We need change," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonics that shouldn't exist. I gave them everything in the register without counting, my eyes fixed on their white ties. The bills disappeared into pockets that seemed to lead nowhere. "Is she still washing?" they asked. "For tonight, yes." "Does machine 13 remember?" "For tonight, yes." "Will you open the door when it's your time to be inside?" "For tonight, yes." They laughed, or made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could hurt. "You're lying. That's good. The honest ones don't last. The ones who really would open the door, who really would trade places, they're the ones who end up in machine 13, washing themselves forever." After they left, I found the register full again, but some of the bills were wrong. They had presidents I didn't recognize, denominations that didn't exist. I left them there, afraid to touch them. At 4:44 a.m., I unlocked the storage room door. This time, something had changed inside. The scratches on the floor had formed a pattern, concentric circles with symbols between them that hurt to look at directly. In the center of the pattern was a photograph, face down. I knew I shouldn't pick it up. Every instinct screamed to leave it alone, but I recognized the back of it. It was the Polaroid my mother had kept in her wallet, the one of me at my college graduation, the one that had disappeared from her personal effects at the hospice. I picked it up and turned it over. It was me at graduation, but I was standing next to my mother. The problem was, she hadn't been there. She'd been too sick to travel by then, had watched the ceremony on a live stream from her hospital bed. But here she was in the photo, healthy and smiling, her arm around me. On the white border at the bottom, in her handwriting, "The deal is 7 for 7. You were always going to end up here. I'm sorry." I pocketed the photograph, my hands shaking. At 5:33 a.m., I went to check the desert lights. My hand hesitated on the back doorknob longer than before. What if the pattern had changed? What if there were 4 lights, like the voice on the phone had said there should be? I opened the door. 3 lights hung in the desert, but they were closer than the night before. Much closer. Maybe 100 yards out instead of what had seemed like miles. And I could see them more clearly now. They weren't lights at all. They were eyes. Massive, unblinking eyes that glowed with their own bioluminescence, attached to something that my brain refused to process. Something that existed in more dimensions than I could perceive. 3 eyes, watching. Always watching. Waiting for something. I closed the door and locked it, my heart hammering. The rule said free was safe, but safe was clearly a relative term. At 6 a.m., the lint trap cleaning revealed something new. In dryer 13, there had always been only 12 dryers before, I was certain. I found a driver's license. My driver's license. But the expiration date was wrong. It expired in 2031, 7 years from now. The address wasn't my old apartment or my car, but the Desert Wash Laundromat, Highway 95, Tonopah, NV. I burned it with the rest, watching my own face curl and blacken in the flames. The last hour of my shift, a normal customer came in, an elderly man with a basket of clothes that smelled like mothballs and loneliness. He moved slowly, counting out exact change for the machines with arthritis-gnarled fingers. Been coming here 40 years, he said to me as he loaded his clothes. Since before the changes. Used to be normal once, just a laundromat. Then they built it on the wrong spot, or maybe the right spot, depending on how you look at it. What do you mean? I asked. He looked at me with cloudy eyes that seemed to see too much. This place sits on a threshold, between what is and what isn't. The machines wash clothes, sure, but they also wash the things that cling to us. Guilt, regret, memories we can't live with. The previous owners figured it, out by accident. The current management, they've made it a business. Mrs. Vega, he laughed, a dry sound like wind through dead leaves. Mrs. Vega's just middle management. The real owners, well, they're not exactly from around here. Not from anywhere you'd recognize as here. Why do you keep coming back? Because I've got things that need washing. Things that won't come clean anywhere else. Been trying to wash out what I did in Korea for 40 years. Almost got it clean. Maybe another few months. He paused, looking at machine 8 as it filled with water. Your mother came here, you know. About a year ago, middle of the night. She used machine 13. My blood went cold. You saw her. Hard to miss. She put something in that machine, something that glowed. Made a deal with the woman in the sundress. 7 years of service from her bloodline in exchange for 7 months of clarity. 7 months to say goodbye properly. He looked at me sadly. You're the payment, son. You're what she washed into the world. At exactly 7 a.m., Mrs. Vega arrived. She looked at me with that stillness that wasn't quite human and smiled. You're learning quickly, she said. That's good. Tomorrow night is special. October 26th. The anniversary of the accident that created the first threshold. The woman in the sundress will finish her washing. Someone will need to take her place. She handed me my envelope of cash and a new piece of paper. Memorize these additional rules. You'll need them tomorrow. The new rules read, Rule 8. On anniversary nights, the storage room door opens both ways. What's inside can come out, and what's outside can go in. Do not be near it at midnight. Rule 9. If machine 13 floods, do not attempt to stop the water. Let it run until it finds what it's looking for. Rule 10. The desert lights multiply on anniversaries. Count them anyway. The number tells you how many will try to enter. Rule 11. When the woman in the sundress says goodbye, do not respond. Acknowledgement creates obligation. I drove to a motel with my 670 towels and got a room, my first real bed in almost a month. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother in this place, feeding something glowing into machine 13, making a deal that would trap me here. I pulled out the photograph from the storage room and stared at it. In the fluorescent motel light, I noticed something I'd missed before. In the background, barely visible, was the laundromat. And in its window, a figure in a sundress, watching. Night 3, the anniversary. I arrived early at 10:30 p.m. The parking lot wasn't empty this time. 3 cars were already there, all different makes and models, all with their hoods up and engines exposed to the desert air. No drivers visible. Mrs. Vega was inside, standing at machine 13 with someone else. A man in a business suit that looked expensive but outdated, like something from the 1980s. His skin had a grey tinge, and when he moved, he left brief after images, like a video, with frame lag. "This is Mr. Carthage," Mrs. Vega said. "He's from the Home Office. He's here to observe the anniversary transition." Mr. Carthage extended his hand, and I shook it reflexively. His skin felt like old paper, dry and fragile, and his grip was both too strong and somehow insubstantial. "Marcus," he said, and his voice came from 3 seconds in the past. "We've been watching your progress. Very promising indeed. The Home Office has high hopes for you," Mrs. Vega added. "It's rare to find someone with the right qualities. The bloodline connection helps, of course, but it's more than that. You have the right kind of damage." "Damage?" I asked. Mr. Carthage smiled, revealing teeth that were all canines. "Everyone who works here successfully is damaged in specific ways, broken in places that match the breaks in reality. You've lost things, your mother, your home, your sense of how the world works. Those losses are gaps we can use." "Use for what?" "To maintain the threshold, to keep the washing cycle going, to ensure that what needs to be cleaned gets cleaned, and what needs to stay dirty stays dirty." He checked a watch that moved backward. "It's almost time. Remember the new rules. The anniversary makes everything more intense." They left together, walking out the back door into the desert. Through the window, I watched them disappear, but not by walking away. They just stopped existing at a certain distance from the building, like they'd crossed an invisible border. At 11:00 p.m., my shift officially began, and immediately everything felt different. The air was charged with static electricity that made my skin crawl. The fluorescent lights pulsed in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, and Machine 13 was already running, even though no one had started it. The woman in the sundress was sitting in her usual chair, but she looked more solid than before, more real. Her dress had color now, yellow sunflowers on white fabric. Her hair moved in a breeze that didn't exist. "Tonight's my last night," she said, without looking at me. 63 years of washing, finally clean, finally ready to leave. "What happens when you leave?" I asked, even though I suspected I already knew. "Someone else takes my place. Someone else feeds their guilt into Machine 13 and watches it spin for decades until it comes clean. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." She turned to look at me then, and her eyes were the color of the desert sky just before dawn. "It was supposed to be you, you know. Your mother made sure of that. You were the payment, the one who would take my place. But what? But you're not guilty enough. Not yet. You need more weight on your soul to anchor you here. The machine won't accept someone who doesn't have enough to wash." Before I could ask what she meant, the bell chimed. A family of 4 entered, parents and 2 children, all wearing hiking gear that looked decades out of date. They moved in perfect synchronization, turning their heads at the same time, blinking in unison. "We need to do our laundry," they said, in perfect chorus, their voices creating an unsettling harmony. I wanted to tell them to leave, to run, but rule 1 was clear. Serve all customers equally. The machines take quarters. There's a change machine by the... "We know," they said, still in unison. They moved to 4 different machines, numbers 1, 4, 7, and 10, and began loading clothes that materialized from nowhere. The clothes were covered in dirt that looked like grave soil and smelled of deep earth and forgotten time. At 11:30 p.m., more customers arrived. A man in a hospital gown, wheeling an IV stand that wasn't connected to anything. A woman in a wedding dress that was soaked despite the desert air. A child who looked about 8, carrying a teddy bear that had human teeth in its smile. They all went to different machines, all began washing things that weren't quite clothes. The hospital patient washed surgical tools that screamed when the water hit them. The bride washed a veil that bled red into the suds. The child washed the bear, and I could hear it crying inside the machine. By midnight, the laundromat was fuller than I'd ever seen it. Every machine except 13 was running, and the combined sound was overwhelming. Not just mechanical noise, but whispers, cries, prayers in languages that predated speech. Then the storage room door opened. Not unlocked, not forced. It simply swung open on its own, revealing absolute darkness beyond. Not the darkness of an unlit room, but the darkness of nothing, of void, of space between spaces. Something stepped out. It was me, or rather, it was what I might become. This version of me was older, grayer, wearing the same desert wash uniform, but faded and stained with substances I couldn't identify. His eyes were solid black, and when he smiled, his mouth had too many teeth. "Hello, Marcus," he said, in a voice that was mine but echoed with the depth of years. "I'm you from 7 years from now, still working the night shift, still following the rules, still washing things that can't come clean." "That's not possible," I said, but even as I spoke, I knew it was. This place didn't follow normal rules of time and space. "Your mother didn't just make a deal for 7 months," he continued, moving closer. His footsteps left wet prints that glowed faintly. "She made a deal for 7 years of service. But here's the thing, time is negotiable here. 7 years can be 700 if you're not careful. And you won't be careful. You'll make mistakes, break rules, and each violation adds time to your sentence. You're lying. Check your pocket." I reached into my pocket and found a driver's license I'd burned hours ago, whole and unburned. The expiration date had changed again, 2038 now, 14 years in the future. Every rule you break, every deal you make, every time you try to help someone who comes through, those doors, it all adds up, and the only way out is to find someone to take your place. Someone guilty enough, desperate enough, damaged enough. He smiled wider, and I saw that his tongue was black. "Someone like the you that you used to be." The payphone rang. Not at its scheduled time, but wrong, urgent. It rang 13 times before I could move to answer it. The voice on the other end was my mother's, but not from the storage room. This was her real voice, weak and tired from her last days. "Marcus, honey, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. The cancer was going to take me in weeks, and I needed months to set things right, to make sure you knew I loved you, to say goodbye properly. They offered me time, and I took it. I took it knowing what it would cost you." "Mom," my voice cracked like I was 13 again. The woman in the sundress, she told me the truth after I'd already agreed. 7 years minimum, but only if you're perfect. Only if you never break a rule, never make a mistake, never try to save anyone. But she also told me something else. There's a way out. On the anniversary night, when one soul leaves, another can leave with them if they solve the riddle of Machine 13. What riddle? What washes but never comes clean? What runs but never empties? What holds guilt but has none of its own? The line went dead. My future self was standing right behind me when I turned around. "She never could just give a straight answer," he said. "Even dead, even trying to help, she had to make it complicated. Get away from me. I can't. I'm you. I'm always you. Every night for 7 years, or 14, or 21, or forever, you'll be here, watching the machine spin, following the rules, burning what comes out of the lint traps, and eventually you'll become me." The lights went out again, all except Machine 13, which was glowing brighter than ever. Inside, I could see something spinning, not clothes, but light itself, twisted into impossible shapes. "Unless," my future self said in the darkness, "you win the game tonight. Answer the riddle, take the woman in the sundress's place, and leave after your 7 years. Or what? Or break the cycle entirely, destroy Machine 13, end the threshold, close the laundromat forever." His black eyes reflected the machine's glow. But that would mean releasing everything that's been washed here. Every sin, every guilt, every memory that someone paid to have cleaned. 63 years of accumulated horror, all flooding back into the world at once. The family in hiking gear approached us in their synchronized way. "It's almost time," they said in their chorus. "The anniversary moment approaches. Someone must take her place." I looked at the woman in the sundress. She was standing now, moving toward Machine 13. The other customers had formed a circle around it, all watching, waiting. "It has to be someone," she said, not looking at me, but speaking to me nonetheless. "That's the rule. Someone always has to be washing. The cycle can't stop. If it stops, the threshold collapses, and what's on the other side comes through." "What's on the other side?" She turned to me then, and for a moment, her face flickered, and I saw what she really looked like. Not the young woman who died in 1960, but something ancient and tired, held together by will and the endless spinning of Machine 13. Everything we've been keeping out, everything the washing keeps at bay, the guilt and horror of every person who's ever come here, magnified by the threshold, given form and hunger. She smiled sadly. "It would devour Tanopa first. then Nevada. Then it wouldn't matter because there wouldn't be anyone left to see what came next. At exactly midnight, Machine 13 stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Every other machine stopped too, frozen mid-cycle. The fluorescent light stayed off, but a new light source emerged. The desert eyes, all of them, pressing against the windows. Not 3, not 4, but dozens, all watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The woman in the sundress opened Machine 13's door. Inside was nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness, but nothing in the truest sense. A space where existence simply wasn't. Someone has to go in, she said. Someone has to become the new anchor, the new washer of sins. My future self stepped forward. It should be me. I've already served 7 years in my timeline. I know what's coming. I can handle it. No, the woman said. You're a paradox. You can't anchor something that requires linear time. It has to be someone from the present. The hospital patient shuffled forward, dragging his IV stand. I'll do it. I'm dying anyway. Been dying for 30 years, ever since the accident. This would just make it official. You're already dead, the woman replied. You just haven't accepted it yet. The dead can't anchor the living world's guilt. One by one, each entity in the laundromat offered themselves, and one by one, she rejected them. 2 dead, 2 alive, 2 human, 2 other. None of them could take her place. It has to be Marcus, she finally said. It was always going to be Marcus. His mother paid for this moment with 7 months of clarity. The debt must be collected. I thought about the riddle my mother had given me. What washes but never comes clean? What runs but never empties? What holds guilt but has none of its own? Wait, I said, the answer suddenly clear. The riddle. The answer is the laundromat itself. This place washes but never comes clean because it absorbs everything that's washed here. It runs but never empties because time loops back on itself. It holds guilt but has none of its own because it's just a place, just machines and walls and a threshold, the woman finished. Yes, the laundromat itself is the answer, which means the laundromat itself can take my place. Mr. Carthage materialized beside us, his grey face furious. That's not possible. The rules clearly state. The rules state someone must take my place, the woman interrupted. They never said it had to be a person. This place has been washing itself for 63 years, trying to clean the blood from its parking lot where I died. It's more guilty than any of us. Mrs. Vega appeared too, stepping out of the storage room's darkness. This is highly irregular. But not against the rules, I said, understanding flooding through me. That's why Machine 13 is different. It's not just a machine, it's the heart of this place. The part that feels, that remembers, that carries the weight of everything that's been washed here. The woman in the sundress walked to Machine 13 and put her hand on its door. 63 years I've been here, washing my death, my interrupted life, my unfulfilled promises. But the laundromat has been washing longer. It's been trying to wash away its own existence, its own wrongness, the fact that it shouldn't exist but does. The machine began to vibrate, not mechanically, but organically, like something waking up. If we feed the laundromat into itself, she continued, if we make it wash its own existence, it creates a paradox. A washing machine washing itself, a threshold trying to cross through itself. That would destroy everything, Mr. Carthage said, his voice coming from multiple timelines at once. The threshold would collapse, the other side would break through. Or, my future self said, understanding dawning on his face too, it would create a perfect loop, the laundromat washing itself forever, becoming its own customer, its own guilt, its own redemption. No one would need to anchor it because it would anchor itself. The desert eyes pressed harder against the windows. Cracks appeared in the glass. Whatever was on the other side wanted in, could sense the threshold weakening. We have to decide now, the woman said. Either Marcus takes my place, or we try the paradox. I looked at my future self, at the black-eyed version of me that I'd become after years of this place. Then I looked at the photograph in my pocket, my mother and me at graduation, together in a moment that never happened but somehow existed anyway. Mom made a deal to give me 7 months to say goodbye, I said. But she also gave me the riddle. She knew there was another way. She was trying to tell me how to break the cycle. I walked to the register and opened it. Among the regular bills were the wrong ones, the ones with impossible denominations and presidents that didn't exist. I grabbed them all. What are you doing? Mrs. Vega asked. These bills are from timelines that don't exist, right? Payments from realities that never were. She nodded slowly. Then they're perfect for paying for something that shouldn't happen. I walked to machine 13 and fed the impossible money into its slot. The machine accepted them, even though it had no slot for bills, only quarters. The machine's vibration intensified. Inside its window, the nothing began to change, to swirl, to become something. Everyone out, I said. If this works, the laundromat is going to fold in on itself. If it doesn't, we all become part of the washing, the woman in the sundress finished. Either way, my 63 years are ending tonight. The entities began to leave, the family in hiking gear walking backward out the door, the hospital patient dissolving into mist, the bride floating up through the ceiling. My future self looked at me one last time. This is the choice I never made, he said. The risk I never took. In my timeline, I chose safety. I chose to take her place and spend eternity washing guilt that wasn't mine. He smiled with his too many teeth. Make the better choice. He faded like smoke, erased by the paradox of a timeline that now might never happen. Only Mrs. Vega, Mr. Carthage, the woman in the sundress, and I remained. You're destroying valuable infrastructure, Mr. Carthage said. The Home Office will not be pleased. The Home Office can find another threshold, I replied, pressing machine 13's start button. The machine began its cycle, but instead of water filling it, the laundromat itself began to bend and fold, the walls curving inward, the floor tilting toward the machine like everything was being drawn into a drain. Run, the woman in the sundress said, but she was smiling. Run, and don't look back. I ran for the door as the laundromat collapsed into itself. The fluorescent lights exploded in showers of sparks. The other machines crumpled like aluminum cans. The floor tilted at an impossible angle, and I had to climb more than run. Behind me, I heard machine 13's sound change from breathing to something like laughter, like crying, like the sound of reality tearing and repairing itself simultaneously. I burst through the door into the parking lot as the laundromat folded into machine 13, which folded into itself, which folded into nothing. The desert eyes watched from all around, hundreds of them now, but they were pulling back, retreating from something even they didn't want to witness. The implosion was silent. One moment the desert wash laundromat was there, a concrete block of impossible geometry folding into itself. The next moment, it wasn't, just empty desert where it had stood, not even a foundation remaining. But machine 13 was still there, sitting alone in the sandy lot, running its eternal cycle. Inside its window, I could see the laundromat, somehow contained within the machine, washing itself over and over. The woman in the sundress was in there too, finally part of what she'd been trying to wash for 63 years. She was free and trapped simultaneously, cleaned and dirty, existing in the paradox. Mrs. Vega and Mr. Carthage stood beside me, observing the machine. Interesting solution, Mrs. Vega said. Unorthodox, but effective. The threshold is maintained, but internalized, self-sustaining. The Home Office will want to study this, Mr. Carthage added. A threshold that requires no maintenance, no staff, no external management, just an endless cycle of self-washing. What about my debt? I asked. My mother's deal? Mrs. Vega smiled her segmented smile. The deal was for 7 years of service. You've created a scenario where the service provides itself. The laundromat serves itself eternally. The debt is both forever unpaid and constantly being paid. Another paradox. So I'm free? As free as anyone ever is after touching a threshold, Mr. Carthage said. You'll see things now. The edges where reality doesn't quite match up. The places where the washing didn't quite get everything clean. But yes, you're free from active service. They handed me an envelope. Inside was $33,600. Payment for 100 days of service compressed into 3 nights. Or maybe payment for 7 years that happened and didn't happen simultaneously. There is one condition, Mrs. Vega said. Machine 13 needs a caretaker, not to operate it. It operates itself now, but to make sure no one disturbs it, no one opens it, no one breaks the cycle. Once a month, you'll need to check on it, clean around it, make sure it's still running. And if it stops? It won't, she said with certainty. It can't. It's washing itself. If it stops, it ceases to exist. And if it ceases to exist, it can't stop. Another paradox, another self-sustaining loop. They left then, walking into the desert and disappearing at that same invisible border. I was alone with Machine 13, which hummed and churned and breathed in its endless cycle. I looked through its window one more time. Inside, the laundromat was still there, compressed into impossible space. I could see customers coming and going, some human, some not. I could see the woman in the sundress, finally at peace, part of the wash cycle itself. I could see myself in there too, or versions of myself. All the possibilities that hadn't happened. The me who took her place, the me who ran on the first night, the me who opened the storage room door when my mother called. All of them washing clean, over and over, forever. Epilogue. 6 months later. I'm writing this from my apartment in Las Vegas, a one-bedroom with actual furniture and a bed that doesn't require quarters to use. The $33,000 covered my debts, got my car fixed, gave me enough cushion to find regular work. I tend bar now at a casino off the strip, the graveyard shift because day shifts feel wrong after what I've experienced. Once a month, I drive out to that spot on Highway 95, 40 miles outside Tonopah. Machine 13 is still there, sitting in the desert like a monument to impossibility. The county tried to remove it twice. The first crew's equipment broke down, all of it, simultaneously, in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The second crew saw something in the machine's window that made them quit on the spot. Now, there's a chain link fence around it and a sign that says hazardous equipment, do not approach. I have the only key to the gate. When I visit, I clean the dust off the machine, check that it's still running, it always is, and document what I see in the window. The logbook Mrs. Vega gave me is nearly full now. 6 months of observations, of watching the laundromat wash itself clean over and over, never quite succeeding, never quite failing. Sometimes I see my mother in there, young and healthy, doing laundry like any other customer. Sometimes I see myself, aged and grey, still working the night shift in a building that doesn't exist anymore. Sometimes I see the woman in the sundress, and she waves at me, grateful and trapped, free and bound, real and impossible. The desert eyes still watch, but from a distance now. They're curious about the paradox, about the threshold that exists and doesn't exist simultaneously. But they don't approach. Even entities from beyond reality understand that some paradoxes are better left alone. Last week, I got a letter. No postmark, no return address, just my name on an envelope that appeared under my apartment door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with familiar handwriting. My mother's. Marcus, the washing is almost done. 7 years or 700, time moves differently in the machine. I wanted you to know that the deal was worth it. Not just for the 7 months, but for this. For showing you that there are places where the impossible happens, where the rules can be bent if you're clever enough, where love can reach across death and time and paradox. Machine 13 will need a new caretaker eventually. Not for years yet, maybe decades, but eventually. When that time comes, you'll know who to choose. Someone desperate enough to believe, damaged enough to understand, clever enough to find another way. The cycle continues, but differently now. Better, maybe. Or at least more interesting. All my love, Mom P.S. Check your pocket. In my pocket was the photograph from the storage room, me and her at graduation, but it had changed. Now there were 3 of us in the photo. Me, my mother, and the woman in the sundress, all standing together in front of the laundromat, all smiling, all impossible. I keep the photo on my nightstand now, next to the logbook and the key to Machine 13's fence. Every night before I sleep, I look at it and remember that some things can be washed clean, some things can't, and some things exist in the space between, forever cycling, forever changing, forever remaining the same. The desert wash laundromat is gone, but it's still there, compressed into Machine 13, washing itself for eternity. The woman in the sundress is free, but she's still washing her death after 63 years. I escaped my 7-year sentence, but I'm still bound to check on the machine, to maintain the paradox, to ensure the threshold stays stable. Some nights, when I'm tending bar and the casino gets quiet, I hear it, the distant sound of a washing machine running its cycle. The other bartenders don't notice, but I know what it is. It's Machine 13, resonating across impossible distance, reminding me that I'm part of its cycle now. Not trapped in it, but connected to it, tethered to it by choice and circumstance and the deals we make when we're desperate. I've started seeing other thresholds too, like Mrs. Vega said I would. The places where reality is thin, where the washing didn't quite get everything clean. There's a 24-hour diner on Charleston where the coffee sometimes pours itself. There's an all-night grocery store on Sahara where aisle 7 leads somewhere else between 2 and 4 a.m. There's a laundromat, because there's always a laundromat, on Fremont where the dryers sometimes dispense clothes no one put in. I don't investigate these places. I've learned my lesson. One threshold is enough for a lifetime, but sometimes, when I'm driving back from checking on machine 13, I stop at that diner and have coffee that pours itself. I chat with the waitress who casts 2 shadows. I leave a tip that's exactly $42, and I remember Mrs. Vega's segmented smile when she offered me impossible wages for an impossible job. The world is full of thresholds, full of places where the washing happens, where reality cleans itself or fails to. Most people never notice them. But once you've worked the night shift at the Desert Wash laundromat, once you've followed the rules and broken them, once you've created a paradox that sustains itself, you can't not see them. And late at night, when the desert is dark and the stars are bright and machine 13 hums its endless cycle in the middle of nowhere, I sometimes think I made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the easy choice, but the right one. The laundromat washes itself now, forever and never, always and not at all. The woman in the sundress finally finished her 63-year cycle by becoming part of it. My mother's deal is both fulfilled and ongoing, a debt that pays itself. And me, I'm the caretaker of a paradox, the guardian of a machine that shouldn't exist containing a building that doesn't exist anymore. Watching them wash each other in an endless cycle that keeps something terrible at bay. It's not the life I planned, but then again, I hadn't planned on being desperate enough to answer a help wanted sign that promised impossible wages for impossible work. The check engine light in my Honda finally died. Not fixed, just dead. Like it gave up trying to warn me about problems I couldn't afford to fix anyway. Sometimes, driving through the desert at night, I laugh about that. The car that was dying when this all started is still running, held together by duct tape and paradox, like everything else in my life now. Machine 13 will outlast us all. My Honda, the city of Las Vegas, maybe even the desert itself. It will keep running, keep washing, keep existing in its perfect paradox. And as long as it does, the threshold stays stable, the horror stays contained, and the cycle continues. That's the real secret of the Desert Wash laundromat. It was never about cleaning things, it was about containing them, about taking the things that shouldn't exist, the guilt, the horror, the impossible grief, and giving them somewhere to go, something to do, an endless cycle to trap them in. Now the laundromat itself is trapped in that cycle, washing itself forever, the container becoming the contained. And somewhere in that infinite loop, my mother found enough clarity to say goodbye. The woman in the sundress found her freedom. I found my way out of desperation. Not a happy ending, but not an unhappy one either. Just an ending that keeps ending, over and over, in the window of a washing machine that sits alone in the Nevada desert, running forever on quarters that were never inserted, washing clothes that were never worn, in a laundromat that no longer exists except inside itself. Follow the rules. That's what Mrs. Vega told me on my first night. Follow the rules exactly, and you might survive. But she never said what happens when you create new rules, when you build a paradox so perfect that it sustains itself. She never said what happens when you turn the laundromat into its own customer, make it wash its own existence, trap it in its own cycle. Now I know, you become responsible for it. Not trapped by it, but tethered to it. The caretaker of an impossibility, the guardian of a threshold that guards itself. And on quiet nights, when I'm cleaning the dust off machine 13 and watching the laundromat wash itself through the window, I sometimes see new things in there. New customers, new employees, new versions of the same old story. Desperate people taking impossible jobs, following impossible rules, trying to survive until sunrise. They're not real. They can't be, since they're inside a laundromat that exists only inside itself. But they're not unreal either. They exist in the space between, in the threshold between real and not, between clean and dirty, between possible and impossible. Just like me, I suppose. Still here, still checking on machine 13, still making sure the paradox holds, still washing myself clean of the 3 nights I spent in a laundromat that doesn't exist anymore, except for the way it exists forever, spinning in its own cycle, in the middle of the Nevada desert. The rules still matter. They always will. But now I know the most important rule, the one Mrs. Vega never told me, the one I had to figure out for myself. Sometimes the only way to follow all the rules is to create a situation where the rules follow themselves. Machine 13 understands that now. The laundromat understands it. The woman in the sundress understood it in the end. And now, so do I. The Desert Wash laundromat is closed. It's been closed for 6 months. It will be closed forever. And it's still running, still washing, still serving customers who exist and don't exist in a space that is and isn't, following rules that apply and don't apply in a cycle that ends and never ends. That's the real horror and the real beauty of it. It's over and it's never over. It's finished and it's just beginning. It's washing itself clean and it will never be clean, and it doesn't need to be clean because it is the washing. Welcome to the Desert Wash laundromat. We're always open, we're always closed, and Machine 13 is always running,